The galaxy had been calm for a long time. The great fleets of the Galactic Empire moved slowly between stars, guarding trade routes and showing the flag of imperial power. The Empire believed they had mapped every known world, every known race, every known danger. To them the galaxy was already tamed. Nothing new could surprise them. That belief began to change on a cold and quiet cycle when something strange appeared on the outer edge of their borders. At first it was only a faint signal, a distorted whisper in the deep void. Imperial scanners picked it up but dismissed it as random static from a dying star. It pulsed once, faded, then came again, almost like a heartbeat in the darkness. The pattern caught the attention of a young Imperial officer. He ran more scans and sent the data up the chain. Higher command was not impressed. To them this was the kind of noise that deep space always produced. But as the hours passed, the signal grew stronger. It became clear it was not random at all. It was a beacon, deliberate and steady. Then a shadow appeared on long-range sensors, slow-moving, angular, and large enough to be a warship. The officers in the command center leaned forward as the readings sharpened. The object did not match any known design in the Imperial ship registry. It was neither a civilian hauler nor a pirate cruiser. Its hull was long and flat, painted in black with no visible markings, scarred with burns, as if it had been through battles and survived. The Empire's recognition programs failed again and again. There was no match. Inside the ship the crew moved with calm. They wore dark uniforms without flashy insignias. Their screens displayed alien symbols, and their voices carried a rhythm the Empire had never heard. It was a language completely unknown to the Imperial translators. The ship was human, though. The Empire had no name for that yet. The humans themselves acted as if they had been here before. The captain sat in her chair with one leg crossed over the other, reading a report while her officers plotted their course. No one seemed nervous. No one looked like they were making first contact with a galaxy-spanning empire. To them, it was simply another day in space. The ship ignored the first hails, the second hails, and even the automated legal warnings. It kept gliding forward like a predator that didn't care if it was seen. Imperial destroyers moved to intercept. 3 of them forming a wall in the darkness. They sent an open-channel demand. "This is the Imperial Navy. You are in restricted space. Identify yourself immediately." The voice of the Valkar captain was sharp. There was silence for several long seconds. The humans didn't rush to reply. Finally the comms crackled, and the human captain's voice came through, deep and steady. "Not looking for trouble. Just passing through." The Valkar captain glanced at his bridge crew and smirked. He saw only soft-skinned bipeds on the other side of the screen. No claws, no fangs, no visible weapons. Clearly these strangers didn't understand the danger of speaking so casually to the Empire. He ordered them to prepare for boarding. The human ship did not raise shields, did not change course. It simply slowed down. Imperial Marines moved toward the airlock, their boots echoing in the narrow corridors of their destroyer. Their weapons charged and ready. They expected to find nervous civilians or stubborn traitors. They expected pleading or bribery. They did not expect boredom. The humans at the airlock looked almost tired. One was leaning against the wall. Another was checking a datapad. Not a single weapon was drawn. When the Marines stepped inside the docking tunnel, the human ship pulsed once. A silent vibration that made every Imperial display flicker. In an instant the destroyer's lights died. Their engines went dead, and all weapon systems went offline. Panic rippled through the Imperial crew. The boarding party froze, unable to move forward or back. Then the human captain's voice came over the dead channels, clear as if she were standing in their own control room. "You might want to rethink your welcome policy." The destroyer crews worked frantically, trying to bring systems back online. But nothing responded. Their own diagnostics showed no damage, no breach, no sabotage. It was as if their ships had simply decided to take a nap. Minutes later, the human ship powered up its engines and drifted past, gliding between the powerless destroyers without so much as a scratch on its hull. From the bridge of the Imperial flagship, the Valkar captain stared at the screen, his jaw tight. Never in his decades of service had he seen a ship that could do this without firing a single shot. As the black warship vanished into the dark, he gave the order to send the encounter report to High Command. He didn't like the taste of it, but he knew what it meant. They had just met something the Empire didn't understand. Far behind them, in the cold space between stars, the human crew carried on as if nothing unusual had happened. One officer brought the captain a fresh cup of coffee, another joked about the expression on the alien captain's face. To them it was just another crossing, another misunderstanding, nothing worth raising an alarm over. But to the Empire, it was the first ripple of a wave they could not stop. A shadow had entered their waters, and for the first time in centuries, they were not the hunters, they were the ones being watched. And somewhere in the captain's quiet smile was the unshakable truth. The humans had arrived, and they were not impressed. The report from the Valkar captain reached Imperial High Command in less than an hour. The moment the message was decrypted, the war room filled with noise. Senior officers argued in sharp tones. Some dismissed the event as an exaggeration. Others warned that this was a dangerous unknown, the most dangerous kind of unknown. On the holomap, the black warship was marked with a pulsing red dot, moving deeper into Imperial space. It had already passed through 3 patrol zones without slowing down. No weapons fire, no shields raised, yet somehow no one had been able to stop it. The Grand Admiral of the Empire, a tall, insectoid being with glimmering blue eyes, tapped his claw against the table. "We cannot allow this vessel to reach the core," he said in a voice that cut through the noise. "Interception is authorized. Bring it to heel." 3 destroyers and a heavy cruiser were dispatched. The cruiser was the Vornath's Fist, a ship that had crushed pirate fleets and survived battles against rogue factions. Its captain, Zorath Jan, was a veteran feared for his ruthless precision. He accepted the order with a thin smile. "This human ship," he said to his crew, "will either kneel or burn." The interception took place near the twin moons of Korvath. The Imperial formation appeared out of hyperspace like a wall of steel, their engines burning bright in the cold dark. The human ship was alone, smaller than the cruiser, smaller even than the destroyers, and yet it simply stayed on course. Open channels lit up. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Zorath Jan of the Imperial Navy. You will cut your engines and prepare to be boarded." Inside the human bridge, Captain Hayes sat in her chair, one hand resting loosely on the armrest. "And if we don't?" she asked over the comm. Her tone was not hostile, not mocking, just casual. "Then you will be destroyed," Zorath said, his voice as cold as the void between stars. Hayes tilted her head, exchanged a look with her second officer, then leaned toward the comm. "We're just passing through, no harm meant. But if you try to board us, you won't like what happens." Zorath muted the channel and gave a sharp order. "Target their engines, disable them." The cruiser's weapons charged. The destroyers fanned out. Energy beams lanced toward the human vessel, only to vanish against a shimmer of distorted space. Not shields, not armor, something else. The beams seemed to bend, their energy scattering into nothing. "Shields are not registering," the Imperial tactical officer reported in disbelief. "It's not possible." Then the human ship pulsed again, a single invisible wave, and every Imperial weapon system went offline. Alarms screamed through the Vornath's Fist. The destroyers drifted helplessly, their navigation gone. In the chaos, a new sound filled the comms, a soft, steady voice. "Captain, you need to tell your people to stand down before I decide this isn't a friendly chat." Zorath gritted his teeth, his pride boiling, but he could not ignore the fact that his ship was now blind and deaf. The only systems still working were life support and basic lighting. "How are you doing this?" he demanded. Hayes' answer was calm. "Trade secret." The humans didn't fire a single shot, didn't make any dramatic threats. They simply restored Imperial systems and continued on their way. drifting past the cruiser like a shark swimming past a fishing boat. When Zorath reported to High Command, his voice was tight, the words bitter. We could not stop them. In the imperial capital, the Emperor's council chamber was tense. The advisors read the incident logs and traded uneasy glances. One counselor, a reptilian scholar named Dravel, tapped a claw against the datapad. They have something that bends energy, he said. If it is technology, we must have it. If it is biology, we must understand it. The Emperor's long fingers curled against the armrest of his throne. I want to know everything about these humans, where they come from, who they answer to, and most importantly, what else they are hiding in. The days that followed, Imperial intelligence scrambled to gather any trace of data. They intercepted stray transmissions in the unknown language. They mapped the human ship's movements. They even bribed smugglers to follow it at a distance. But the humans seemed to know when they were being watched. Every tale lost them within hours. Meanwhile, aboard the human vessel, life was almost boring. The crew moved through their duties with practiced ease. An engineer named Price was repairing a sensor array while joking about how pushy the locals were. The helmsmen adjusted their course with no more urgency than plotting a route to a coffee shop. In the mess hall, one of the younger crew members asked the captain why they didn't just avoid the Empire entirely. Hayes stirred her tea slowly before answering. Because we need to know what's out here. And if they're the biggest player in this part of the galaxy, it's better to meet them on our terms, not theirs. Still, even Hayes knew they were attracting too much attention. She began making subtle course changes, skipping the most heavily patrolled systems, keeping their speed irregular. To the Empire, it looked like random wandering. But to Hayes, it was careful positioning. The Vornath's Fist and its sister ships were ordered to shadow the humans without engaging. Zorath found the order humiliating. Yet he followed it. He watched through long-range scopes as the Black Warship visited a neutral station, traded for fuel, and left without incident. The crew of the station later reported that the humans were polite, direct, and strangely unshaken by the presence of Imperial spies. It was this unshakable calm that unsettled the Empire most of all. The humans acted as if nothing in Imperial space could surprise them, as if they had already seen far worse. Some in the Council began to wonder what kind of galaxy had forged them. The answer, though still far away, would shake the Empire to its core. For now, the Black Warship continued deeper into the stars, its engines humming like the slow heartbeat of a predator. And everywhere it went, the whispers followed. They're here, the smuggler said, and they don't care who knows it. The Emperor's throne hall was a place designed to make visitors feel small. The ceiling soared high above, carved with constellations that glowed faintly in the dim light. Towering pillars lined the chamber, each one etched with the victories of the Galactic Empire. The floor was polished black stone, reflecting the pale light of the chandeliers like the surface of a still pond. But that morning, the room did not feel majestic. It felt tense. The air was thick with unease as the Emperor's closest advisors gathered in a tight circle around the central hollow projector. The glowing image of the human warship floated in the air, its black hull rotating slowly, scarred yet intact. This is no pirate craft, Dravel, the reptilian scholar said with a flick of his scaled fingers. The design is too deliberate, the construction too precise. These scars, they are not from losing battles, they are from surviving them. An insectoid general named Kareth hissed softly, his thin antennae twitching. The Valkar destroyers and the Vornath's Fist were both rendered helpless without a single shot fired. What kind of weapon does that? No weapon, Dravel replied, his voice calm but firm. At least, not in the sense we understand. It's something else, something they've hidden well. The Emperor leaned back in his throne, his dark eyes studying the floating ship. He had ruled for decades, faced uprisings, rebellions, and rival empires. Yet something about this vessel made his instincts sharpen. Where is it now? The intelligence minister, a thin figure cloaked in white, bowed slightly. It is moving deeper into Sector 12 at a leisurely pace. It stopped briefly at a neutral station to trade for fuel. The crew made no threats. They bought supplies, then left. Their behavior is casual, almost careless. The word careless made the Emperor's gaze narrow. He knew the kind of commanders who acted without fear, those who had the strength to back it up. "We must know more," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Send our best spies, learn their origins, learn their weaknesses if they have an empire of their own. I want to know its size, its strength, its reach." In the far corner of the hall, a silent observer spoke for the first time. She was an elder diplomat named Valora, known for her calm wisdom. "Your Majesty, have you considered the possibility that they are scouts?" The Emperor turned his head slowly toward her. "Explain. If this ship is alone," Valora said, her voice steady, "then either they are confident enough to send a single vessel into unknown territory, or—" She let the silence draw out. "They have more ships waiting, ships we have not yet seen." The thought sent a ripple of unease through the advisors. The Empire had not faced an unknown fleet in generations. Meanwhile, in the shadowed corridors of the Imperial Intelligence Network, the hunt for answers began. Agents were dispatched to track every rumor, every whispered sighting of humans. Smugglers were bribed to follow the Black Warship, and listening posts tuned their receivers to capture every fragment of the alien language. But the humans seemed to know they were being followed. They would vanish into asteroid fields, slip through minor jump points that the Empire barely charted, then reappear in an entirely different sector, always moving, never predictable, aboard the human vessel. The crew went about their business as if the galaxy's largest superpower wasn't chasing them. Captain Hayes spent her mornings in the war room, reviewing star charts and updating their travel path. Her officers reported calmly, with none of the edge one might expect from a crew in hostile space. "They're still following us," the helmsman said one afternoon. "2 destroyers, keeping just far enough back to avoid provoking us." Hayes didn't even look up from her chart. "Let them. It's better they watch us than send a fleet in blind." The engineer Price grinned from across the room. "Think they've figured out what hit them yet?" Hayes smirked faintly. "Not a chance." What the Empire didn't know, and what Hayes had no intention of telling them, was that her ship carried systems that weren't just classified. They were officially denied by every government on Earth. Technologies born from desperate wars, tested in the darkest corners of space, and never shared with outsiders. While the humans moved like shadows, the whispers began to spread through the underworld of the galaxy. Smugglers, mercenaries, and traitors began speaking the word human in hushed tones. They came out of nowhere. One Zethori trader told a contact, "Took on 3 destroyers and a cruiser, didn't even scratch their paint." "They're not here to conquer," another said. "But stars help you if you get in their way." In the Imperial capital, those whispers reached the ears of the wrong people. Rival factions within the Empire began pushing for different responses. The military wanted to capture the human ship and dissect it. The diplomats argued for cautious engagement, and the Emperor watched, waiting for the humans to reveal more. The moment came sooner than expected. An Imperial spy embedded at a neutral station sent back a report that the humans had docked again. This time they stayed for several hours talking with captains from 6 different species. What were they trading? The Emperor asked when the report was read aloud. The spy's voice, transmitted through the chamber speakers, hesitated. "Information, Your Majesty, maps, star routes, coordinates to systems outside our borders. Systems we've never seen." The hall went silent. If the humans had maps the Empire didn't, it meant one of 2 things. Either they had allies beyond Imperial space, or they had traveled far further than anyone believed possible. Either way, Dravel said quietly. "They are not lost wanderers, they are deliberate explorers." The Emperor's gaze returned to the slowly rotating image of the Black Warship, its scarred hull glinting in the holographic light. His instincts told him what the reports could not. This was no accident, no coincidence. The humans were here for a reason. What he didn't yet know was that the reason would bring the Galactic Empire to the edge of a war it could not win, and that before long, the humans would not be the ones being hunted, they would be the hunters. And the Empire would learn a truth it had long forgotten: power is never permanent, and the most dangerous enemy is the one who isn't afraid to walk right into your throne hall without bowing. The humans did not come to the Empire's capital in a fleet. They did not arrive surrounded by escorts or cloaked in secrecy. They came in the same black warship that had already humiliated Imperial destroyers, its scarred hull carrying the same silent defiance. To the Empire's eyes it was arrogance. To the humans it was efficiency. The station chosen for the meeting was the Grand Diplomatic Spire, a massive orbital hub that served as neutral ground for negotiations. Its silver towers glistened under the light of the nearby sun. Docking rings hummed with activity as shuttles and frigates came and went. Imperial guards in gleaming armor lined the corridors, their weapons polished, their eyes sharp. They were told this meeting would be sensitive, but none of them expected what they were about to see when the human delegation arrived. There were no elaborate uniforms or jeweled insignias. Captain Hayes wore a simple dark jacket, boots scuffed from years of use. Her crew followed in plain uniforms. They moved with the relaxed precision of people who had walked into dangerous places before and left on their own terms. The Imperial reception party expected bows, formal greetings, or at least the respectful lowering of eyes. Instead, Hayes walked straight past them, her gaze scanning the hall like someone assessing an engineering blueprint. "Which way to the council chamber?" she asked, her voice steady and unhurried. The lead Imperial diplomat, a tall avian with gold-plated feathers, stiffened at the lack of ceremony. "You are in the presence of Imperial authority," he said sharply. Hayes cut him off without raising her voice. "You invited us for talks, not theater. Let's skip the delays." That single line traveled faster through the station's gossip network than any official report could. By the time Hayes reached the great chamber, half the counselors already knew about the human who didn't bow. The council chamber itself was a ring-shaped hall with tiered seats rising around a central speaking platform. Holographic banners floated in the air, displaying the sigils of dozens of member worlds. The Emperor was not present in person, but his likeness shimmered on a central holopanel, his gaze unblinking. As Hayes stepped onto the platform, the Imperial lead counselor began the formal greeting, his voice dripping with controlled authority. "Visitors from the unknown, you stand before the Galactic Council, an assembly that governs." Hayes' first words cut through the ceremony like a blade. "How much of this galaxy do you actually control, and how much do you just claim?" A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. Some counselors leaned forward, others bristled. The lead diplomat's feathers ruffled visibly. "You will address this body with respect." "I am," Hayes said simply. "I'm asking a question you should know the answer to." A pause followed, heavy and uncomfortable. The counselors exchanged glances, unused to being confronted so directly. Hayes continued, "Your patrols are concentrated in certain lanes, your border stations are stretched thin, and your star charts don't match the routes my people have traveled. So tell me, are you rulers? Or are you caretakers?" The lead counselor sputtered, clearly unprepared for this kind of engagement. "We maintain peace across all sectors." Hayes tilted her head slightly. "Across the sectors you can reach, sure, but there are entire clusters you've never set foot in, and yet you list them under Imperial control. Why?" From the higher tiers of the chamber, a gruff counselor from the Dranex coalition let out a dry chuckle. "She's not wrong," he said. "Half the space you claim is unpatrolled wilderness." The council erupted into overlapping voices, some arguing, some laughing, some offended. The Emperor's hollow image remained silent, his gaze fixed on Hayes, studying her, measuring. Hayes let the noise run its course, then spoke again. "We're not here to fight you. We're here to understand what you are and whether you're worth talking to. That single sentence quieted the hall. The arrogance was undeniable, but it was the kind of arrogance that came from someone who could back it up. The lead counselor, regaining some composure, asked carefully, "And what do you think of us so far?" Hayes glanced briefly around the chamber. "You've built a structure that looks strong from the outside, but I think you've forgotten that power isn't the same as reach, and control isn't the same as stability," the Emperor finally spoke, his voice deep and even, carrying across the entire chamber. "And what of your people, Captain Hayes? What is your Earth control?" Hayes met his gaze without hesitation. "We control ourselves, and we don't waste ships claiming territory we can't defend. We'd rather have 10 strong systems than 100 weak ones." For the first time, the Emperor's expression shifted slightly. Not a smile, not approval, but something between curiosity and recognition. He knew the tone of a leader who had fought for survival. From the side of the platform, Dravile, the reptilian scholar, spoke. "You speak like someone who has seen war." Hayes' reply was quiet. "I've lived it." The session ended without agreements, without treaties, and without the warm glow of diplomacy the Empire preferred to project. But the human captain left the chamber without looking back, her boots echoing against the polished floor. The counselors watched her go, their thoughts divided. Outside in the docking bay, the human crew boarded their ship with the same calm they had shown on arrival. A few curious onlookers tried to get close, asking questions about Earth, about their weapons, about their travels. Most were met with polite smiles and vague answers, as the black warship detached from the station and drifted toward open space. Imperial sensors tracked it, noting its steady pace, its unhurried movements. No signs of fear, no change in course. It was as if the humans were saying, "We've seen what you are, and we're not impressed." In the Emperor's private chamber, away from the Council's noise, he stood alone before a star map, the sectors of Imperial space glowing faintly. Beyond the borders lay the uncharted darkness. Somewhere out there, he knew, lay the rest of whatever force these humans belonged to, and for the first time in years, the idea of the unknown did not feel like an opportunity. It felt like a warning. And far from the capital, aboard the human warship, Captain Hayes sat in her chair, watching the stars slide past on the main display. Her helmsman asked, "So, what's your read on them?" Hayes leaned back, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "They're proud, they're stretched thin, and they think they've seen everything worth seeing. We'll keep talking." "For now," the helmsman glanced at her. "And later?" Hayes' voice was almost a whisper. "Later depends on whether they're smart enough to listen." The Imperial Council could not agree on what to make of the humans after the meeting. The diplomats saw them as an opportunity, the generals saw them as a challenge, and the Emperor saw them as something far more dangerous and unknown with no fear. In the end, it was decided that the humans should be tested, a polite word for probing their limits. The proposal came from Admiral Kareth, whose insectoid features hid none of his disdain for the strangers. "If they truly wish for peace," he said in the council chamber, "then they will not refuse a joint military exercise. And if they are as weak as they appear, we will expose it." His words were greeted with nods from the more hawkish members. The invitation was sent informal. Flowery language. Dressed up as an offer of goodwill, Captain Hayes received it aboard her ship, reading it aloud to her crew in a tone that made it sound more like a prank. "They want to run combat drills with us," she said, "to measure tactical compatibility." Her second officer, Lieutenant Mara, raised an eyebrow. "You think they're testing us?" "I think they're trying to size us up," Hayes replied, setting the datapad aside. "And I think we should let them." When the humans arrived at the designated training range, a wide expanse of empty space dotted with holographic beacons, Imperial fleet was already waiting. 3 heavy cruisers and a swarm of smaller attack craft, their silver hulls gleaming under the nearby star, their formation tight and disciplined. The Imperial exercise commander, a broad-shouldered Valkar, Officer named Terrans hailed them with a thin smile. "For fairness," he said over the channel, "we will allow you to choose your ship for the drill." Hayes leaned back in her chair and pretended to think. "We'll use this one," she said simply. "The Vulcars." Smile faltered slightly. "This one, that's your older vessel, isn't it?" "Older's a word for it," Hayes said with a shrug. "But she do." In the control room of the Imperial flagship, Theres muttered to his officers, "They don't even take this seriously." The rules of the exercise were straightforward. The Imperial fleet would attempt to destroy the human vessel in a simulated engagement. All weapons set to low-power training mode. If the human ship could last 10 minutes without being disabled, they would be declared the winners. The countdown began. The Imperial cruisers fanning out to encircle the black warship. Hayes gave a single nod to her crew. "Drones," she said. From the belly of the human ship, a cluster of small, angular machines emerged, each no larger than a fighter craft. They spread in all directions, moving with unnerving precision. The Imperial sensors tagged them instantly. Dozens of red markers blooming on their tactical maps. "Target the drones first," Theres ordered. "They're distractions." The first volley of simulated fire lit the void, bright pulses streaking toward the swarm only to miss entirely. The drones darted away like flocks of birds, weaving in impossible patterns. Seconds later, they were on the Imperial ships, skimming along their hulls, striking key sensor nodes and weapon mounts with pinpoint bursts of simulated fire. On the Imperial flagship, alarms blared as their tactical displays began to dim. "Primary sensors down." An officer shouted, "We've lost targeting on the drones." "They're disabling us with training shots," another added, disbelief in his voice. Theres ground his teeth. "Switch to defensive formation. Keep them away from the engines." But the drones didn't attack the engines. They didn't even go for the bridge. They went for the ship's communications arrays, cutting them off from each other, leaving each cruiser blind and isolated. It was a tactic the Empire rarely faced divide and silence before striking. Meanwhile, the human warship didn't move aggressively. It simply drifted, turning slowly, its crew calm. Hayes watched the tactical display with a faint smile. "Mark the fleet as destroyed," she told her systems officer. Within 8 minutes of the exercise's start, the Imperial fleet was on paper wiped out. The official simulation logs recorded total losses, no survivors. The COM channel opened. Again, Theres' face appearing, his expression caught between confusion and irritation. "What was that?" "Training drones," Hayes said casually. "We don't use them much anymore. They're old tech. 50 years at least." 50 years? Theres repeated, his voice almost a whisper. Hayes nodded. "Still get the job done, though." When the report reached the Emperor, it caused an uproar in the upper echelons of the military. Half the admirals wanted to demand a second, more controlled test. The other half quietly recommended that provoking the humans any further might not be wise. In the lower decks of the Imperial military, however, the story spread like wildfire. Pilots and engineers whispered about the human drones, their speed, their precision, their ability to strip a warship system's bare in minutes. Some claimed the drones weren't even remotely controlled, that they fought like living creatures back. Aboard her ship, Hayes discussed the exercise with Mara. "You know they're going to ask for another test," Mara said. "Let them," Hayes replied. "We've got plenty more surprises, do we?" Mara asked with a grin. Hayes smirked. "Oh, you have no idea." Far away in the Imperial capital, Dravel studied the combat logs alone, his claw tracing the movements of the human drones. He recognized the pattern, not the technology, but the thinking behind it. It was the strategy of predators, creatures that didn't just overpower prey, but dismantled it, piece by piece, until the kill was inevitable. He closed the file and sat back, uneasy, for the first time in decades. He wondered if the Empire was staring at the beginning of a conflict they could not win, and in the cold silence of space, the black warship sailed on, its drones retracted and dormant. its engines burning a steady trail. The crew relaxed but ready. The test had been nothing more than a small show of teeth. And if the Empire thought that was the full bite of humanity, they were in for a rude awakening. The days after the training exercise were not quiet inside the Galactic Empire. In the high halls of power, the military was restless, the diplomats were unsettled, and the Emperor listened to more reports about humans than any other matter. The official records said the exercise had been a valuable learning opportunity, but everyone knew the truth. The humans had humiliated the Imperial fleet without breaking a sweat. In the outer sectors, where Imperial patrols were thin, the name human began appearing in whispers and smugglers' tailies. These were not the polished rumors of the core worlds, but the rough accounts of spacers who lived and died by what they saw. One cargo captain swore he had seen the black human ship appear in the middle of a pirate raid, disable every raider without firing a lethal shot, and vanish before Imperial forces arrived. By the time that story reached the capital, it had already grown into something more dramatic: humans arriving like ghosts, fighting like shadows, and leaving without taking anything. The Imperial propaganda machine tried to dismiss these tailies, but in the fringe colonies, the people listened. They had long lived under the boot of the Empire's taxes and patrols, and the idea of a new, fearless player in the galaxy was intoxicating. The truth was that Hayes and her crew had no grand plan to become legends, but they weren't shy about stepping in when they saw injustice. More than once they intercepted distress calls the Empire ignored. They escorted vulnerable convoys through pirate-heavy sectors. They patched up damaged ships for nothing more than a thank you. On one such occasion, in the mining belt of the Rithus system, the black warship stumbled upon a desperate scene. A freighter under attack by a squadron of raiders, its hull already torn open in places, its distress beacon screaming into the void. Hayes didn't hesitate. "Bring us in," she ordered. Raiders, sleek and fast, turned to face the new arrival, perhaps thinking they had another easy target. They learned quickly how wrong they were. Hayes deployed the drones, not the older training models used in the exercise, but a newer, more dangerous design. They didn't just disable the raiders' weapons, they sliced through targeting systems and crippled engines, leaving the attackers adrift. When the freighter's captain, a gray-skinned Zalari trader, made contact, his voice shook with relief. "You're not Imperial?" "Not even close," Hayes replied. "You're clear to limp home. We'll see you to the edge of the belt." That act of assistance, small in the human's eyes, rippled far in the galaxy's undercurrents. It was a quiet defiance of the Empire's unspoken rule that only they could protect or choose not to protect those within their claimed territory. The Empire noticed, and they did not like it. At high command, Admiral Kareth slammed a clawed hand on the conference table. "They are moving freely through our sectors, interfering with our patrol zones, and undermining Imperial authority. This is not coincidence. This is a calculated effort." Velora, the elder diplomat, shook her head. "Or perhaps they simply go where they choose, unbound by our borders." "That is worse," Kareth spat. "It means they do not recognize our authority at all." The Emperor sat silent, his gaze on the star map where the black ship's last known positions were marked with small red dots. They were scattered, unpredictable, no pattern that could be pinned down. "It means," he said slowly, "that they have no fear of us." Meanwhile, aboard the human ship, the crew was well aware they were being tracked. Hayes didn't try to hide it from them. "They've got half their spies chasing us, and the other half writing reports," she told Mara over coffee in the mess hall. "If they knew half the places we've been, they'd lose their minds." "You think they'll try again?" "Another exercise, maybe?" Mara asked. "Not for a while," Hayes said. "They'll try something subtler, something political. Maybe they'll lean on the stations we visit, try to cut off supplies." And she was right. In the weeks that followed, several neutral stations suddenly announced new security regulations after visits from Imperial inspectors. Ships that traded with the humans found themselves delayed, taxed, or searched without cause. It was a slow tightening of the noose, but humans were not the kind to wait quietly while someone closed a trap. Hayes adjusted their routes again, staying ahead of Imperial blockades. Using hidden jump lanes and half-forgotten refueling posts, the Empire's net kept closing, but it always closed just behind them. Then came the encounter in the Veil Nebula, where the humans were shadowed by an Imperial cruiser for 3 straight days, refusing to engage but refusing to leave. Hayes finally had enough. She ordered the ship to drop from faster-than-light speed and face the cruiser head-on. The comms channel opened, the Imperial captain's voice sharp. "You are in restricted space. Change course immediately, or..." Hayes cut in, her tone almost conversational. "Or what? You'll block our path? Fire on us." "We both know how that ends." The captain didn't answer right away, but his silence spoke volumes after a long pause. He gave a short, frustrated order, and the cruiser turned away. When the story of that standoff reached the capital, it was twisted and reshaped by the time it passed through the ranks. Some said the humans had faced down an entire Imperial battle group. Others claimed they had cloaked and vanished in front of the captain's eyes. The truth didn't matter. The myth was growing, and myths were harder to kill than ships for the Emperor. It was becoming clear that the humans' greatest strength was not their weapons. It was their unpredictability. They didn't follow the patterns of other powers. They didn't respond to intimidation the way lesser species did. They are like smoke, Dravel told him in a private audience. You can try to close your fist around them, but they will slip through and sting you when you least expect it. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Then perhaps we stop chasing the smoke and wait for the fire to come to us. But Hayes had no intention of walking into any trap the Empire might lay. For now, the black warship stayed in the shadows, always moving, always watching, and always ready. Because if the Empire thought the humans had shown all their cards, they were in for a brutal awakening. The real weapons, the real fleet, the real teeth, those were still waiting far beyond the Empire's reach. It began with a single transmission, faint but clear, cutting through the static of deep space like a blade. It came from a neutral colony on the fringe of Imperial space, a small world called Arravale. The voice on the channel was tight with fear. "This is Governor Talon of Arravale Station. To any vessel within range, Imperial fleet approaching. They've issued no demands, their weapons are armed. We have civilians, repeat, we have civilians aboard the black warship." The crew fell silent as the message repeated. Hayes didn't look to her officers for a vote. She simply said, "Set course," and the engines roared to life. Arravale was a small place, a mining hub surrounded by 3 moons. Its people were mostly traders, miners, and families who wanted nothing to do with the politics of the core. It had no military worth speaking of. Its few defense drones were old, slow, and barely functional. Against an Imperial fleet, they might as well have been toys. When Hayes' ship dropped from faster-than-light travel, the Imperial vessels were already in orbit, 2 destroyers and a heavy cruiser, their silver hulls glinting in the pale light of Arravale's sun. They hung there like executioners waiting for the order to strike. Hayes opened a channel, her voice steady. "This is Captain Hayes of the Terran vessel Vigilant. Identify the nature of your presence in a neutral system." The Imperial Admiral appeared on the display, his uniform pristine, his expression dismissive. "This system has been claimed under Imperial authority as of this cycle. All inhabitants will submit to inspection and resource assessment." "Funny," Hayes replied without a smile, "because the last time I checked, Arravale isn't in your territory." "It is now," the Admiral said flatly. "Your presence is unauthorized. Withdraw immediately." On the bridge of the Vigilant Lieutenant, Mara glanced at Hayes. "They'll fire if we stay," she said quietly. Hayes' eyes didn't leave the screen. "And if we leave, they'll strip that colony bare," she muttered, then spoke louder. "Admiral, if you take one more step toward Arravale, we will end this before it begins." The admiral's smirk was the kind worn by those who had never been challenged, and lived to regret it. "You have one ship," he said. "I have 3, stand aside." The channel cut, and the imperial ships began to move, their engines flaring as they closed in on the station. Hayes didn't shout, didn't bark orders. She simply said, "Drop cloak." The Vigilance shimmered in the light, revealing itself in full, and behind it, the stars seemed to bend and ripple. Then one by one, massive shapes emerged from the void. First came a long, angular warship bristling with gun emplacements, its hull lined with armor plates darkened from countless battles. Then another bulkier vessel whose profile was broken by a row of massive railgun turrets. Then another and another, until the void was filled with the hulking silhouettes of human warships, dozens of them, their weapons ports glowing faintly like the eyes of predators. On the Imperial bridge, the Admiral's voice caught in his throat. "Impossible. There's no record of." "Of course there isn't." Mara's voice came over the comms, sharp as a knife. "You've been looking in the wrong parts of the galaxy." The human fleet spread out in perfect formation, surrounding the Imperial. Ships with surgical precision, targeting locks flared across the Imperial systems. Alarms blaring as every scan confirmed the same result. These ships were armed, active and far more heavily armed than anything the Empire had ever seen from the humans. Hayes opened the channel again, her voice colder now. "You have a choice. Admiral, you turn your ships around and leave this system, or I will erase them from the star map." For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke. The Imperial crews watched the tactical readouts, their captains whispering orders to prepare shields, but they all knew it wouldn't matter finally. The Admiral gave the order to disengage. The Imperial ships turned slowly, their weapons powering down. The Vigilant and its fleet stayed in position until the last Imperial vessel jumped to faster than light. Only then did the human formation shift, the warships slowly peeling away into the dark until only Hayes' vessel remained in sight. Governor Talon's voice came over the comm, heavy with relief. "You just saved us from losing everything." Hayes shook her head slightly. "We didn't save you, Governor. We just reminded them there are lines they don't get to cross." The call ended, and the bridge fell into a rare quiet. Mara broke it first. "Think they'll try again?" "Not here," Haz said. "They'll remember the sight of what was waiting for them." But the truth was, the Empire's retreat was not the end, it was the beginning. The Emperor would now know beyond doubt that the Black Warship was not alone, that Earth's presence in the galaxy was not a curiosity but a force in the capital. The report from the Aravale incident landed on the Emperor's desk within hours. It contained detailed sensor scans, fleet compositions, and tactical projections. The analysts could not agree on one thing: how such a fleet could exist without the Empire knowing. Dravel read the report in silence, then spoke to the Emperor in private. "If this is their main fleet, then they are dangerous. But if this is only part of their strength..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. The Emperor didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the projected image of the human fleet. "They didn't build those ships to show them off. They built them to use them," he said at last. "And now we've seen a glimpse of their teeth." Back aboard the Vigilant, Hayes stood in the observation deck as the stars slid past. Her crew went about their work quietly, the hum of the engines steady and calm. Mara joined her, hands folded behind her back. "Feels like they're going to come at us harder now," she said. Hayes' gaze stayed on the dark horizon of space. "Good," she said. "Let them come. They think they understand war, but they've never fought us on our terms." And somewhere, deep in the cold expanse beyond Imperial borders, more human warships waited in silent readiness, their captains listening for the call, knowing that sooner or later, the galaxy would need to learn humans didn't just survive in the dark, they owned it. The standoff at Aravale spread through the galaxy faster than any official broadcast. Smugglers told it in dimly lit bars. Traders whispered it over encrypted channels. Even Imperial officers spoke of it in private with lowered voices. They all repeated the same haunting image, an endless wall of human warships sliding out of the dark, their guns silent but ready, their formation perfect, their message unmistakable in the imperial capital. The council chamber was more tense than it had been in decades. The emperor sat high on his throne, his fingers drumming slowly against the armrest. His advisors argued around him, voices clashing like the weapons of rival soldiers. They cannot be allowed to hold such power without oversight. Admiral Kareth snapped, his insectoid mandibles clicking in irritation. If we hesitate, they will claim more systems under the guise of protection, just as they did at Aravale. Velora, the elder diplomat, spoke with deliberate calm. They claimed nothing, Admiral. They merely defended a neutral colony from your fleet. Perhaps the question is not why they were there, but why we were. That colony lies within a resource field we require, Kareth began. But the Emperor's voice cut through the argument like a blade. Enough! The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the throne. The Emperor leaned forward, his gaze fixed not on Kareth or Velora, but on the holographic projection of the human fleet, each ship rendered in chilling detail. We have learned more in the last month about humanity than in the last century about some of our own neighbors, he said slowly. We know they can appear without warning, that they can neutralize our ships without firing a shot, and that they have a fleet capable of matching our own. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And yet, they have not sought to conquer. Dravila's tail twitched slightly, his reptilian eyes narrowing, which means their restraint is deliberate, which makes them more dangerous, the Emperor agreed. Power without ambition is harder to predict than any empire's hunger. It was decided in that moment there would be no direct war, not yet. Instead, the Empire would shift to a posture of wary cooperation, public gestures of peace, private layers of surveillance. They would learn everything they could about Earth and its fleet, even if it meant smiling while sharpening the knife behind their back. The message went out across Imperial space. The humans were now recognized as independent allies, granted safe passage through certain trade routes, welcomed at least officially into the galactic stage when the transmission reached. The Vigilant, Mara read it aloud on the bridge, her tone dry. We are now, apparently, valued partners in mutual security and prosperity. She looked up at Hayes. Sounds like they want to hug us with one hand and strangle us with the other. Hayes smirked faintly. That's fine, we can play polite. Until? Mara asked. Until they make the mistake of thinking polite means weak, Hayes said, turning her chair toward the viewport. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of calm and tension. Human ships began appearing more openly in Imperial space, not just the Vigilant, but smaller frigates, supply craft, and the occasional lumbering carrier. They traded with neutral stations, offered escort to vulnerable convoys, and quietly mapped every corner of the space they passed through. Imperial crews who once looked down on humans now watched them with wary respect, sometimes even curiosity. The old dismissive jokes faded, replaced by quiet conversations about their technology, their tactics, their stubborn refusal to be intimidated. On one trading station at the edge of Imperial jurisdiction, Hayes found herself face to face with an Imperial captain she'd bested months earlier. They met by accident in the docking bay. His eyes narrowed, but his hand extended. I've learned not to underestimate you, he said simply. Hayes shook his hand without a word. But beneath the surface, both sides were preparing. The Empire upgraded its fleets, adding new layers of shielding and redundancy to systems most vulnerable to human interference. The humans, for their part, rotated ships in and out of Imperial space, never letting the Empire see the same vessels for too long, always keeping their full strength hidden. The turning point came at a diplomatic summit held in orbit over the glittering world of Varela Prime. The humans sent Hayes and a small delegation. The Empire sent a mix of diplomats and high-ranking officers. The meeting was cordial, full of formal language and rehearsed smiles, until the final session, when an Imperial noble made the mistake Of pressing too hard, you ask for recognition, the noble said. But you give no proof that you can be trusted with the power you wield. Hayes didn't flinch. Trust is earned by what you do, not by what you demand, she said. And we've shown more restraint in this galaxy in a year than your fleets have in a century. The room froze. Some of the Imperial delegation bristled. Others stayed silent. The Emperor's representative gave a measured nod. Perhaps that is why you are still here, he said. When the summit ended, there were no handshakes for the cameras, no public declarations. But there was an understanding. The humans were not leaving. The Empire would have to live with them. As the Vigilant departed Varela Prime, Mara stood beside Hayes on the bridge, the stars stretching ahead in a sea of cold light. Think we've bought ourselves peace? Mara asked. Hayes shook her head slowly. No, we've bought time, and time's all we need. Because she knew, and the Empire suspected, that somewhere far beyond the borders of mapped space, the rest of Earth's power waited unseen. Battle. Groups stationed in systems the Empire didn't even know existed. Weapons the galaxy had never faced. And when the day came that the Empire pushed too far, when they crossed a line they could not uncross, the humans wouldn't just arrive in a single black warship. They would come in force. The galaxy would look to the void and see the sky itself fill with the steel of Earth's fleets. And in that moment, they would understand the truth that had been there from the first quiet encounter. Humans didn't need to roar to be feared. They only had to arrive, and the stars would remember.